All right, sure. I'll ask you an easy one. You want one to set up for before we do it? All right, ladies and gentlemen, online kids, can you hear me? Hannah Brown, can you hear and see what's going on? Krista, thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you. All right.
Are you already recording?
No, I'm gonna. Oh, I did on there.
Can we get our stuff out before you first? Like, can we like?
Wait, we're recording on the Zoom right now, so. All right, it's happening, guys.
Wait, we'll make like one like.
We're recording this for you. You guys are good. And these three moves to give you a chance to not fail.
I want you guys to succeed. Yeah.
I want you guys to succeed too, even though
I think this is honestly this will get a second.
We're still a minute. We're going. All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Actually, it's afternoon. That's my bad. How was your guys' lunch?
Good.
Good. I did not get anything. Oh. Anyways, today we're going to be talking about the home front. We're going to go over a few questions because you guys do have a quiz today. So we're going to go over stuff from the Pacific, European front, rising dictators. So we're going to start off with Chloe. What was the name of the pact that Hitler broke when he invaded the Soviet Union?
Unappeasement Act.
Not the Appeasement Act. Very close.
I got it.
Unaggression.
Sarah, yes.
Non-aggression pact.
The non-aggression pact. Thank you. I knew it. You were getting there, Chloe. I knew what you meant. All right. Wilson, what was the main reason that America got into World War II? Yes. Pearl Harbor. Thank you. Yeah, good job, Papa. Thank you. Now, the Q. What was the political philosophy that Mussolini followed?
That was socialist.
Not socialist.
No. Fascism.
Fascism. There you go. Thank you. Put an online kid on the spot. All right. Hannah Brown. Tell me one rule that Hitler broke from the Treaty of Versailles. I can wait, Hannah. Well, I want to ask an online kid, but thank you. I do appreciate it.
Sorry, what'd you say?
Tell me one rule that Hitler broke from the Treaty of Versailles.
I'm not quite sure.
All right, that's okay. Brody, do you want to try helping Hannah out?
He had soldiers and he wasn't supposed to.
He had a standing army. Correct. He had a standing army. He wasn't allowed to. The Treaty of Versailles took away their standing army, their navy, their air force, and left them with a huge war burden debt that they had to carry. All right, that's good. Should be enough of a review for right now. I hope you guys remember some of those questions that are going to be on the quiz. I would definitely remember mine those histories.
There's a quiz today.
The quiz is today.
All right.
So the home front. Pull out that bell ringer sheet that we've been working on for the last couple classes now. I got some stuff to add for you guys to add to it. It's taking about 5 minutes. We'll discuss some of these questions, and then we're going to go on a guided journey together. Yes, right. Oh, yes, your sheets. Right. I checked your guidance. Same for you, online kids. Please pull out that sheet of paper for the last few bell ringers we've been doing. Add these questions to it. These will be turned in later today. In-person kids, you'll just turn it into the front. Zoom kids will be emailing it to me by the end of class. We got a negative ticket we got to do. But the last few things we're writing on. Up there on the board, right there, 1 through 5. No, it's not very tough. It doesn't. Guys, got a couple more minutes left. Checking the chat. Wrong way. Oh, I'm in the chat. Good, good. All right. Should be plenty enough time.
Yeah.
Owen, please answer number 1. Which president decided to drop the atomic bomb? Truman, yes. Remember, before FDR has to make this decision, he dies, celebrated as a national hero. Truman takes over and has to make the biggest decision the president has ever made, if he's going to drop the bomb or not. All right, Chloe, number 2. Can people's support and opinions affect the outcome of a war? Purely opinion question. Possibly. Why do you think that?
Maybe because like if enough people like support an opinion, like
If enough people support an opinion, they can change the outcome of a war. Sure. Brody, you guys want to add on to that?
Yeah, because like once people are cheering for you, you're gonna be better.
Right. The home front can be an entire cheer squad for a nation. Yeah. The Q, go ahead.
The population of the country, like the people that are fighting, none of them want to fight.
Right. Yeah. Population of a country, they don't want to fight. You're not going to win because if you have all those people, you need to be doing something. Those are good answers, guys. Those are good answers. So Vaughn, for number 4, do freedoms and liberties go down during wartime? And give me an example when we see this.
Yeah. Whenever like there's a good war going on, we can have that
Right, yeah, that's a great example. You just remind me of that one. Yes, the Civil War, Lincoln suspends habeas corpus, which is like you can't talk bad about the war, you can't write anything bad about the president or the war in the newspapers. That's correct. Another example you could have given was 9/11, when the war on terrorism starts. we lose some of our privacy because now the FBI can look through our phones and our messages. And Sarah, for 5, do we make irrational decisions when we're angry or scared? And if you feel comfortable sharing, can you give an example or a story?
Yes, I do not have a story.
You do not have a story. Does anyone have a story of them making an irrational decision when they've been angry? Wilson, yes.
So I don't care for the physics teacher to do me angry.
Okay.
So my rational decision is that I somehow think that not doing my work and including that only affects me.
That is a very rational decision. The teacher obviously just has either a boring tone or just really dry. He makes you angry, and the decision you're making is obviously not helping yourself out. It's a very good and tame example. Thank you. So, these couple of questions are kind of leading into the spirit journey I want us all to go on here in a second. We're gonna go by these questions one by one. I'm gonna give you time to think about it, and hopefully we're gonna walk down this mountain path journey together and arrive at a central conclusion. So I'm gonna give you guys about 30 seconds to think about, can morals or the morale of a nation change the outcome or progress of a war? No, you don't have to write this down. You're purely just thinking about this. Take 30 seconds to turn those gears inside your head, think about it. I'll ask a couple of you what you think, and then we'll move on. We're going to go step by step until hopefully we can all come to a agreed conclusion. Give you about 10, 15 more seconds. All right. Reese, can morals or the morality of a nation change the outcome or the progress of a war?
Yes, because if the leader is like, yeah, we're all just gonna die, and all these people are going to go there, that probably doesn't lose.
Right. Yeah. Having a strong leader and having the people support is a great way to fuel any war. If you don't have the people support, there's a few war examples that we can talk about where we see how that outcome is affected. A great answer. Now, moving from that, this is just a question I'm going to ask you. You really have to think about this one. So, Wilson, tell us again what was the main reason America joined World War II? Pearl Harbor. So, Pearl Harbor. Americans were pretty angry about Pearl Harbor. Would you guys agree with that? Brody, if you see one of your friends getting ganged up by a biker gang, would you and your friends all come together to beat that common enemy?
No.
All right, hypothetically, if you were a better person, would you come together to beat that?
No, it's his problem with that one. How strong is the fight?
Yeah,
they're weak biker gang. Maybe we'll try, but
they're like 18-year-olds who think they're cool because they have one motorcycle.
there's better. I feel like one of my friends could take them on themselves. Like there's better things we could do with our time.
Does anyone else think? Yes, Sarah? Yes, all right. Thank you, Sarah. Or if your friends were in trouble, you would help. I appreciate that. So that means we kind of have a common enemy. Like America is angry at Japan because we got attacked. One of our states got attacked. So we all have this we're all infuriated by the Japanese. So that brings me to the next question that we're going to take about 30 seconds to think about. Do people connect when they have a common enemy?
Yeah.
Go ahead, think about that for 30. Think about that for 30 seconds. There is the whole quote: "The enemy is my enemy is my friend." 42. We can start talking about this, and we're going to elaborate more than just saying yes or no. All right, Preston, what do you think? Do you think people can connect when they have a common enemy? Please give me an example of anything that you can think of. It doesn't have to be history related. It could be basketball related, it could be video game related. Just give me an example. Modern Warfare 2. Please go ahead and explain.
Shepard betrays you.
Ah,
Call Macaron because he was defeated that. Millennium Kill Shepard.
you get your crew and you go and kill that thing. Exactly. Usually when there is a common enemy, people unite and gather together. So going back to that second question, America got bombed by Japan. We have this common enemy now. We're all angry with them. And we're ready to take the fight to them. So what other common enemies has the American people had in recent history? I think 2000s. Osama bin Laden, that's the result of what? 9/11, exactly. Good, yes. 9/11, 9/11 and Osama bin Laden. Sorry, Savan. I just wanted to give you credit for your great answer. Yes, Osama bin Laden and 9/11. That was another attack on American soil. We all get really angry about it. You have the war on terrorism declared. The American people are all gathering around the central cause to fight the Middle East and take the war to them. Now, can you think of a war that wasn't popular at all in the late 1900s? Yes, Mickey. Vietnam, yes. Not officially a war that was declared by Congress. We got into it. Most of the American people didn't understand why we were there. There was no support behind it. There was a lot of drafts and not a huge enlistment. And eventually, when that war comes to a close in a treaty, I like to consider it a loss. It's not considered a loss in the American history books because there was never a war ever declared. But North Vietnam just invades South Vietnam 10 days after we leave, and I'll have all of our troops out into the ocean. So because of that and the lack of the support for that war, it led to a loss. America was actually doing good very militarily against the Vietnamese. Well, we were forced to leave because our own people weren't supporting the war anymore. The same thing is kind of happening now with the war on terrorism. Everyone was all fired up about it 20 years ago at this point, but we've been there for so long, and more generations have gone past. Now people aren't even sure why we're there anymore. Are you guys sure why we're there, or why we're there, or why we actually care to be there? Is that really an answer that McHugh? Does that satisfy you? Like some people believe there's no point in being there, and the support for that war has just dwindled down to where it's kind of a thing that happens in the background. We tried pulling out our troops many times. They always get brought back in, depending on the president. So like McHugh said about Vietnam, yes, it had a lack of support. Not a lot of people signed up, and we ended up losing. So that brings me to the final question, the end of our journey. Does that mean the home front, aka the people, affect the outcome of a war? Sarah's shaking her head yes. How many people say yes? By raise of hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Sarah already said yes. Does anyone really say no? Does anyone think no? Good. So that's the central conclusion that we've come upon. So the rest of this lesson, we're going to talk about the home front for World War II, a huge home front event that was around this war, and we're going to talk about it and how it affected people and the war. To start that off, we got to talk about rationing. I would take out your notes about now, or your iPads if you're writing this on Notability, and we're going to start taking notes. So, rationing was a thing that happened in World War I, yes. And it happens in World War II. But it's slightly different. In World War I, it was just highly recommended that if you were a pure-blooded American, if you were a patriot, that you were going to ration. It wasn't necessarily a question or anything forced upon you. But in World War II, it's government supervised. The government is still being heavy propaganda with it about if you're patriot enough to ration for the people on the war front. But it's also government supervised. The government is now handing you out coupon books. Back in World War I, you were just like, yeah, no meat on Mondays, got it. No sugar on Sundays, okay, I can do that. Now you have coupon books. which have coupons for you to take to the grocery store to give you permission to buy that meat for the month, to buy your 1 pound of sugar on Sundays, so that you can bake that cake on Thursdays for some reason. These coupons are what you use to be able to purchase those ingredients. You also had gas cards. Unlike World War II, World War I, tanks, planes, trains, well, not trains, but finishing the joke, automobiles, cars, tanks, and planes were all in their infancy stages. Model T just came out. We were using planes only really to survey. Tanks came in like the last part of the war and were so ineffective it was laughable. So there was really no reason to ration gas or rubber. But now, thanks to all the technological advancements in the last 20 plus years, you see that planes and tanks and automobiles are now the main way this war is fought. So now we have to ration gas with how much gas people can buy. Ration the amount of rubber that is used. You'll see this with carpooling or car sharing, as they call it. There's a propaganda poster that we'll look at saying if you ride alone, you're riding with Hitler. Because to save on gas and rubber, if you drive with another buddy or two, you're saving 1 car, maybe 2 cars that would have to be on the road otherwise. You're going to see a black market form. Because every time you limit or take away something, it doesn't just go away forever. It's not like, can't buy sugar anymore, poof, it's gone. No, you're going to see creepy guys in back alleys that are going to try to sell you sugar, alcohol, steak. A black market starts to form over these essential items that otherwise wouldn't have been there. You see increasing in wages for workers, because they're working so many hours, to heighten the percentage of their savings. And then FDR raises taxes with his Revenue Act so that he can get more money from Americans and spend it on the war. And that's why wages also go up, so they don't take a huge hit from those taxes. Canning, as you can see in this propaganda picture, was also huge. It was huge in World War I too. Being able to preserve and save as much food as possible. Cross can tell you a story when you had to go down to your grandma's Iowa basement and take out a jar of, what was it? Peaches.
My basement was like a dungeon. Like literally a dungeon. No, I was a little crackhead, so I wasn't there. So I just stayed dedicated all night. My mom was playing. That probably did.
All right. So that's rationing. Now, a lot of people in minority groups get a huge glow up during this time period. The main one being women, changing roles for women. Of course, in World War I, when men went to war, women took up positions in ammunition factories and a lot of secretary jobs. In World War II, that's a bit different. They're now making up 1/3 of the labor force and taking over jobs that men said they could never have, like scientists, mathematicians. Some of them are joining the military and enlisting. Now, working for women is a social stigma, not just even looking at it from a sexist point of view, because in World War II, or during the Great Depression that's happening in the 30s, women working took jobs away from men. And it was shown that men should be the breadwinner so they can feed their family while the woman stays home. So they never went looking out for jobs because there were very limited ones out there. And the ones that were out there should have been for the men, according to 1936. The federal government urged women to join the war production field. All their men are out to work. They need to tap into the women labor force to try to get some of the stuff done. Like I said, they're no longer just secretaries or crossing guards or anything like that, or ammunition workers. They're now working on planes, tanks, automobiles, taking the jobs that men would have had. You have this famous propaganda picture, Rosie the Riveter, saying we can do it, speaking to women. And she rivets the rivets on airplanes. She's the one that puts the wings together. A job that normally would be for men, but women are working on. You have breaking gender stereotypes, like I said, allowing gender discrimination. They allow gender discrimination still in many industries, and women made up only 65% of a man's salary. Both of these are negatives, but positive takeaway from this is that they were working jobs that men normally work, and at this point, women can't turn back anymore. You can't just tell them that they're housewives anymore. They now have worked jobs that men did and probably did them better, and are now, and you'll see in the 60s and 70s, start entering the workforce a lot, because in the 50s, we try to turn them back into housewives and they do a whole bunch of cocaine. Stay happy. Pop propaganda, like the one beforehand with Of Course I Can on Patriotic, Rosie the Riveter, plays a huge part in the home front. It's like mini mind control to keep us all nationalized. And it's nothing different. You see it today. You see it with Trump hats and Biden hats and Trump flags. You see it in the past with yellow journalism and newspapers, but to a minor extent. And this war is huge. American propaganda. Propaganda is just information that is spread for the purpose of promoting some new cause through technology innovations. That being photography, radio, film, with manipulative messages everywhere. You had pictures like these. You had war films showing of American soldiers winning battles against Nazis and people screaming in the theater being like, woo, go America. You have the comic book industry doing it too, which is in its infancy at its time, where you get characters like Captain America. FDR created the Office of War Information, aka American Propaganda, if you like to think about it that way. That's where it starts. You get these official posters actually made by the American government. Usually these posters or propaganda in general emphasize a good versus evil aesthetic here. They try to portray the enemy as evil and us at the home front as being heroes saving our nation. They try to animalize the enemy so that they get dehumanized and us as people get desensitive. As you can see here, this is a Japanese man turned into a monkey, which is, again, incredibly racist and insensitive at the time. They promote the total destruction of the enemy, and they villainize the enemy. In this case, Japan, as you can see on the board. Now, we have a lot more propaganda to look at. Give you 30 more seconds to finish writing this down before I start our next activity. For those of you that are done, please pull out your iPads, go to the World War II module, and at the very last thing there, it should say Propaganda Breakdown. It's going to click on a link that will bring you to a Google Docs, and you need to make a copy. No, this is just an activity. The quiz will come later. The quiz is a full-on quiz. So, we have about 6 image sets we're going to look at, 3 pictures. And there are 3 questions that we're going to answer together. We'll do the first one together, and then the second through the 6th you guys will do by yourselves, but you can work in your group, your pods here, talk to them about this information, what you think. So we'll start off with this first one. Take a long look at it. Take 10 or 15 seconds to process this information. So, the Q, besides this being blatantly racist, what do you think the main theme of this is?
Making the Japanese people look like monsters.
Monsters, monkeys, or animals? Yes,
Yeah.
dehumanizing them.
Yeah.
I love that answer. Thank you. Now, Wilson, what main things stand out for you from these images? What shocks you? Where does your eye go? The sharp, pointy teeth. And that's one that you can't be wrong about. That's just individually where your eye goes on this image. Or these images, I should say. And finally, Brody, what do you think these images are trying to convince you to do or think? Perfect. That the Japanese people are bad and that you should be against them. That's perfect. So we're going to be answering those 3 questions for the next 5 more image sets. We'll briefly talk about them, and this gets to show you a huge amount of propaganda and the themes that they were trying to portray to the American people. Are you guys ready for the next one? Sweet. Thank you guys. I appreciate it.
I can't like.
Make a copy of it, Claude. I appreciate it. I'll put up the next image set so that you can talk to McHugh and Wilson back there to get what the first column was. You've got some pretty good material right there. That's smooth. All right. Here's the second image set. Look at it, think about it, discuss it. If you guys need other people to talk about it with, understand it, and answer these 3 questions of what is the theme, what stands out to you, and what is it convincing you to do or think? If you can't see this all the way up here, don't worry. This PowerPoint is on Canvas called Homefront PowerPoint. The first thing in the world working on. Yes, you'll be emailing it. What's the one we're supposed to go to? So go to the propaganda breakdown. It's one of the last ones in that module. Make a copy of it. Fill these in. I see it. I see it. I was just brilliant. Yeah. All right, I'm going to give you guys 30 more seconds on that.
Is this considered set 2?
This is set 2, yes. You can talk to Sarah to get the information for set 1. All right, let's talk about this. Chloe, what do you think the main theme is for this set of images? So ration. Perfect, exactly. You hit the nail right on the head. This one says don't waste. Buy wisely, cook carefully, eat it all. Meaning don't waste your food, ration it out. This one is the one I was telling you about, one of my favorites, the carpooling one. Saying to save, ration your gas and rubber by driving to work with other people. And of course, this one, go through your wardrobe and make do and mend. Mending your clothes so you don't have to go buy a new one. All about rationing. Savon, what stands out to you out of these images? Hitler. Hitler is, everyone knows about Hitler. Everyone knows that he's a very bad guy. We see him in the paper all the time. And he's like the final boss. Everyone knows what he looks like. So seeing him in the car makes people like, I don't want to be associated with that guy. He's a bad playable character. And finally, Brody, what is this convincing you to do? Ratchet. Correct. Thank you. Savant, please fill in Preston comes back on those answers, especially if he's not here for the third image set. Here's the third one. This one's a little bit easier, self-explanatory. I'm gonna give you guys about 40 seconds to work on this. Give you guys about 10 more seconds. See some of you still typing out there. All right. McHugh, what is the theme of these? What does this image say?
This is about farming.
Farming, more specifically, what?
Food. And, like planting your own food.
What? Exactly, planting your own food so you don't have to buy it. That's great. These are called victory gardens that people had in their backyard if they could. All right, let's try somebody online to answer this. Ashton, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
What stands out in this image to you?
Out of like all three of them,
All three of them. What stands out to you?
probably the agriculture, like farming.
The agriculture and the farming. Thank you. Yes. As you can notice, they're a lot brighter than most things in these images. Draws your eye in. Helps you try to put in subliminal messages like this is what you should be doing. Agriculture and farming is important so you don't have to keep on buying food like McHugh said. Start your own garden for vegetables at dinner time. And Preston, what do you think this is trying to convince you to do? Make your own garden. Very self-explanatory. Victory gardens also happened in World War I and make a comeback in World War II. Hasn't happened yet, but it probably will. Next image check. Another self-explanatory one. Should take about 45 seconds. $15 more seconds, guys. Oh, my bad. Thank you, Sarah, for pointing that out. I'll give you guys 10 more seconds to answer those questions because I not fingered a button. All right. Reese, what is the theme of these images?
Women working.
Women going to work, exactly. Owen, what part of these images stand out to you? in the military uniform and the woman doing a job that she normally wouldn't be doing is standing out to you. These propaganda cartoons trying to convince women to join the workforce because all of our men are out the war. Jasmine, what do you think? What is this trying to convince you to do?
Probably help out.
Who to help out specifically?
Women help out.
Correct. Women help out in the workforce. Do your part. Take these jobs while our men are at war. All right. The next one. This is the last one? No. Fifth one. Political cartoons. And let me read you what this one says. Boss, maybe you better huck me and buy more U.S. defense bonds and stamps. And the contents huck means to sell, like sell the talking moose head so that this guy right here can go buy more bonds. Also, these two images, if you can't see it, are drawn by Dr. Seuss, a man who recently got canceled because. Please take the next minute to look all these over, answer questions. About 10 more seconds, guys. All right. Let's take an online kid. Shane, can you hear me? Come on, Shane. I know you can hear me.
I can hear you.
Perfect. What do you think the theme is for these images?
Like it's not really a form of persuading the Americans to buy war bonds, but like it's like different ways to like scare them into it, basically, or just uses of it, or.
Yeah, of course. Convince or scare Americans into buying war bonds. War bonds were basically you as an American person would go buy a bond from the government. The government would then take your money, funnel it into the war effort, and they promise to pay your money back for that bond with interest. Never usually a lot of interest, but you would maybe get a dime to a few cents back, you know? Has any of your grandmas ever decided to give you a bond for like a Christmas gift or anything? You guys remember Alvin and the Chipmunks, the first one where they give bonds for Christmas? Savings bonds, yeah. Almost the same thing, except the government insured the war bonds. It is a good movie. Now, Wilson, what part of this image stands out to you? The buy and insure, is it because they're all bolded and everything like that? Stand out more? Subliminal messaging? Right? And finally, Owen, what is this convincing you to do? Bingo. Buy war bonds. War bonds, or Liberty bonds, they're also called, were in World War I, and they're in a lot of other wars, but they really helped in trying to fuel more income for the government to spend. Here is our final image set. Please take about 40 seconds to look at this, answer the 3 questions. All right, Chloe, I haven't called on you in a while. What is the main theme of these images? To keep quiet. Well, to keep quiet about what, do you think?
Any information they're hearing.
Perfect. Yes. It's like loose lips sink ships. Good job, Chloe. So we're afraid of of spies from Japan, Germany, or Italy. So any information that the American people hear, they need to keep quiet about it so that information can't be used against us in the military affairs. McHugh, what stands out to you out of these images? The guy's ears. Who do you think that guy is? Japanese, correct. Yes, they're portraying the Japanese with big ears to show that they can hear everything that you're saying about the war effort. And Reese, what are they trying to convince you to do? To not snitch. Don't talk about the war. Correct. These are all many different examples of propaganda that you see throughout World War II. All of them unifying the people to come together to ration, unify them against the Japanese, to prevent them from talking about the war. Even authors like Dr. Seuss got in on making some of these political cartoons and propaganda images. So that's all of them. So if you guys would please not quiz time, no, please send it to me in an email. This will be another thing that's graded. My email is up here, and if you can't see it, I'll read it out loud. It's cmo532@aol.com. Then once we do that, we're going to talk about global of other minority groups. People outside of women also got benefits from the war effort. I'll give you guys 30 more seconds to figure out your technology to send this to me. Online kids, I can write my email in the chat for you.
And Mr. Owens, we're answering those questions right now, so 1 through 7.
Oh, those aren't questions.
Uh,
Those are just talking points.
what are we sending to you?
You're sending me the propaganda activity that we've been doing. Oh, do you need to go back to the last one?
No, it was the first one.
Oh, right. You're having technology issues. That's fine. I remember that. Okay. So, African Americans also get a huge club during this period. They serve with distinction in World War II. They do a great job. They were a major push to fight discrimination after all their honorable efforts in the war. You have A. Philip Randolph, who is a vet who will also try to fight for civil rights on the American home front. No. Definitely American. You have the NAACP membership growing. You're going to see that this is what's going to plant more of the seeds for the civil rights movement in the 60s and the 70s. They finally start campaigning for anti-lynching laws and against poll tax. That's right. That was still going on in the 40s and 50s and into the 60s. African Americans still had to pay to vote and were getting tied up and lynched to vote. Or not vote, but just lynched for doing something that any white person could have said that they did. They still served in segregated military units, though, during the war. You also saw the Tuskegee Airmen, which were the first military aviators, aka pilots, in the U.S. Army Air Corps. So, Tuskegee has a huge importance to African Americans. For about 50 to 60 years ago, You have the Tuskegee Institution in the 1800s, founded by Booker T. Washington. He was an African American who was for civil rights, but he wasn't going to fight for them. He said, African Americans can wait on civil rights, but you have to give them the right to earn $1. He was all about vocational training, giving them the right to have a job and earn money to fight in the same be in the same economy as white Americans. Yeah, at least let them earn $1. You got to. So the airfield and these pilots were named after the institute that he founded, the Tuskegee Institution, and these airmen from the Tuskegee Airmen. Use 10 more seconds to write that down. I'm going too fast. Don't be afraid to tell me. All right. So more minority groups during World War II. You have Native Americans. So during World War II, many Native Americans decided to leave the reservation and assimilate with white society, which we've been telling them to do for years. And believe it or not, the first time they finally go and do this, they face massive discrimination. Oh boy, racist America is racist. Did you believe that? This led to the formation of the National Congress of American Indians and led a few of them joining the military. They serve a massive role which goes underappreciated. The Navajo Code Talkers, exactly, Wilson. So, usually when communicating with our troops across the various fronts and battles, we usually speak in code so the enemy is just not like they're moving 3 miles to the right. We speak in code so it makes it harder for them to understand what we're doing to counter our movements. Now, a lot of these codes can get broken. But Navajo Code Talkers would speak their native language to communicate what their superiors wanted this battalion to do to another Navajo Code Talker who was in the battalion listening on the radio or like that. And then they would communicate. Now, Europeans and Japanese don't have Native Americans just sitting around who speak Navajo that can understand the language. That was only in North America. So this code was near unbreakable. This is how most of our stuff stayed secret and how we were able to continue with a lot of flawless battles because of the Navajo Code Talkers. They simply just spoke in their native language to someone else to relay orders, and their code wouldn't be broken, unlike the ones and zeros that the Germans and the Japanese would use. This was a language that was only specific to North America and certain people. Later, they would be underappreciated after the war. They weren't really recognized for their position until a lot later, which is why we're talking about them now. You hear me talking about them, but immediately after the war, they were not recognized for their actions. You also have the Latinos with the Brasher program. So America made a deal with Mexico, which is like, hey, we need laborers to take care of some stuff for us. Can we hire like some of your people to come up here, we'll feed and house them, and then they can take care of some of their stuff for them. And they're like, yeah, that's a good deal. Go ahead, why not? So we got a lot of these Latinos coming up to America, settling in California, New Mexico, Arizona. And when their contracts were up, many of them would stay behind and wouldn't return because they were enjoying the benefits of living in America. So, of course, that's going to cause some racial tensions. You have the Zoot Suit riots. This is the Zoot Suit over here, this man in this fit. Brody, we've been ranking people on tier list the entire 2 weeks we've been doing this. Where does this fine gentleman rank?
S tier.
S tier? Girls, do you think us guys should go back to wearing zoot suits?
Yeah, that's a good fit. Oh my God.
Sarah shaking her head, yes. Chloe, what do you think? Go back to us guys wearing zoot suits? You think our pants should be that high? I mean, it's just
I think Chloe's a good fit.
All right, a series of riots would break loose across the United States because of naval personnel and Latinos would brawl constantly. The Latinos could be recognized by their zoot suits. And then there would be huge riots in LA, Arizona, New Mexico, places across California of white officers and these Latinos fighting back. But Latinos and many other minority groups did participate in the war. They participated in the war and volunteered for military service in numbers greater to their percentage of population. So there was a lot of people who volunteered for military service that was greater to the amount of people that were living in America. Now, we've talked about a lot of different groups rising up, getting some glow. African Americans with civil rights, Navajo code talkers with Native Americans, Latinos coming in and being able to stay in America. But can you think of one group that maybe not had a good time during this time period?
Japanese.
The Japanese Americans. Thank you, McHugh. Japanese internment camps. Cross, I found a great video that Cross is going to play it on his computer. It's about 14 minutes long. You're going to see internment camps, the Supreme Court case that happens with it. And then we'll discuss a few of these questions on the board.
The nation through the Great Depression, no president was ever more powerful. On February 19, 1942, FDR signed Executive Order 9066. 9066 was the Secretary of War and his commanders in charge of deciding where the military zones would be and who should be removed. It gave the military power over the Attorney General to make these decisions without any hearings or due process. This was unprecedented power for the president, even for FDR. He asked Congress to support Executive Order 9066, and it did.
Congress followed that with Public Law 503, which then gave it power.
The law did not specifically name any race or ethnic group, but allowed the military to impose restrictions on anyone it deemed a threat. But everyone knew who would be targeted. Military areas were created, and at first, curfews and other restrictions were imposed on everyone of Japanese descent. When the evacuation began on March 22, 1942, newsreels announced its start with a tone wavering between fear and contempt. This one, called Out They Go, never mentioned that 2/3 of the evacuees were American citizens, but refers to them by a word we'd never use today.
Japs evacuate vital West Coast areas for the national security. At Los Angeles, 36,000 Japs see the handwriting on the wall and sell out their group before their voluntary departure.
The evacuation wasn't voluntary, it was the law. And before it even began, came mayhem, theft, and loss. People were only allowed to take to the camps what they could carry on their backs. They had to make arrangements to store or get rid of everything else they owned on short notice. The lucky ones got 2 weeks, some only a few days.
Most Japanese Americans had to leave their property behind. There's lots of incidents when, they were cheated or they weren't given full value for their property. There were a lot of fire sales that happened, so they had tremendous losses.
A congressional report 40 years later detailed some of the loss. One proprietor had to sell her 26-room hotel for only $500. Refrigerators were extorted for $5 or less. One man poured gasoline on his house, determined to burn it down rather than leave it behind. His wife stopped him, saying, "We are civilized people, not savages."
Empty streets and vacated stores stand in shadow. And in the country, the same story, abandoned farms.
All they had left were suitcases, sheets, and blankets. 120,000 people, babies, and the elderly. They were searched, some were even tagged. No one knew if they were going to be deported or how long they would be in prison because there were no trials, no hearings, and there was no due process to inform them.
They didn't know what the intention of their government was toward them, and they didn't know what the future held.
The evacuation took almost 18 months. 8,000 actually moved east parts of the country outside of the military areas to avoid internment. The whole thing took place in stages. First, evacuees were taken by buses, cattle trucks, and trains to nearby assembly centers where they would be checked in for a few weeks before being shipped out to the more permanent internment camps.
Assembly centers were oftentimes temporary shelters in fairgrounds and sometimes in horse racing tracks. The conditions were exceedingly rough. Horse stalls that were hastily cleaned up of the manure and the smell and so forth.
The first thing we had to do was to make our own mattresses. Norman Mineta was born in San Jose, California. He grew up to be a congressman and the first Asian American to serve in the cabinet. He served under both President Clinton and President Bush. The idea that their own government taught them to be disloyal. This was a yoke of shame that was borne by the Japanese American population from that time on.
This is what we would do to show this country the extent of our loyalty.
John Tateshi was born in South Central Los Angeles.
We'll give up everything. We'll sacrifice everything we own and all of our futures and go quietly into these camps. It was astounding.
People were confined in camps at some point from May of 1942 to as late as 1946. But at first, many camps weren't even ready. Sewer systems, schools, winter insulation, all had to be built by the very people who were being forced to live there. Most were in the desert where sandstorms were common. Others were built on swamps and overrun by mosquitoes. All of the camps they built were in isolated spots.
10 of them scattered throughout the American West and a couple in Arkansas.
Park Mountain, Poston, and Tule Lake were the largest. Tule Lake also housed those whose loyalty to the government was specifically questioned. The War Relocation Authority, or WRA, called them relocation centers. I remember when they would say, well, you're being interned for your own protection. Well, as a 10, 11-year-old kid, I knew that if I were in here for my own protection, why are the machine guns pointed in at us and not out?
We heard this young man shouting and saying, as I recall, something about they couldn't keep him there, that he was an American. And he started walking out, and the guard, who was probably about 15 feet from him, just shot him in the stomach.
It was a felony for anyone of Japanese descent to live in Oakland on the afternoon of May 30th, 1942. That made 22-year-old Fred Korematsu a criminal. He had defied the evacuation order to stay behind with his Italian-American girlfriend. When he was arrested on this street corner in San Leandro, he knew that the shame of internment would be nothing compared to how his family would react.
When my grandparents got word in Tanforan Racetrack that my father had been arrested, I know that it brought great shame to them. He was treated, like the plague. I mean, no one wanted anything to do with him.
Fred Korematsu had lost his home, his job, and even his girlfriend. He was outraged that an American citizen would be treated like this, so he challenged his arrest. He tested his faith in the Constitution by appealing his case all the way up to the Supreme Court. The Korematsu case lingered for over 2 years. It was finally argued before the court over 2 days on October 11th and 12th, 1944. Korematsu's attorneys argued that Executive Order 9066 was a violation of the 14th Amendment guaranteeing equal protection because only citizens of Japanese ancestry were being forced to report to the assembly centers. And the fact that they were detained without a hearing or a trial was a violation of their Fifth Amendment right of due process, protecting them against the federal government. Solicitor General Charles Fahey argued the case for the United States that in time of war, the government, and especially the president as commander-in-chief, could do what was necessary for the nation's security, even discriminate on the basis of race.
You have to remember, at the time of Korematsu, Brown versus Board of Education hasn't yet been decided. Segregation is still the law of the land.
The Supreme Court handed down one of its most controversial decisions on December 18, 1944.
The Supreme Court ruled in a 6-3 decision that President Roosevelt's order was constitutional.
The court said that this is time of war, and in time of war, it is necessary to do things that might not be permissible in time of peace.
Justice Hugo Black, who later became known as one of the court's great champions of civil liberties and equal rights, wrote the majority decision that accepted the government's argument of military necessity.
Imagine you're a judge. Suppose you don't believe the military, but you might possibly be wrong. And if you're wrong, what will happen if you actually shut down a government policy, a security policy, and then there's another attack?
And this judge knows as much as General Eisenhower. So of course we must give great deference to officials who tell us we have a problem. We know the situation. And we need you to understand that.
For Justice Black, deference to the military while at war was more important than the racial nature of the attorney. He wrote that Korematsu was not excluded from the military area because of hostility to him or his race. He was excluded because the country was at war with the Japanese Empire.
Other justices certainly didn't see it that way. Justice Frank Murphy, for the very first time ever in a Supreme Court opinion, used the word racism. The United States government in this order was targeting Japanese Americans. It wasn't looking at other minority groups that the country also was at war against, Italians, Germans, only the Japanese. And to Justice Murphy, that clearly shows that that order was racist.
Murphy also said that he couldn't see any military necessity for this order.
Justice Murphy also insisted that there was no evidence to justify the president's internment order, and that the majority decision in this case would allow the president to act outside the law.
Murphy made a powerful dissent. Presidents must be reminded that they too are subject to the law, and the law must insist. The law must always be obeyed. Once we depart from that rule, there's no stopping. It is a dangerous thing to tell the president he can ignore the law, or to expect him to, or to put him in the position of his having to do so to save the country.
Also dissenting was Justice Roberts, the same Justice Roberts whose Pearl Harbor report created so much hysteria about Japanese spies on the mainland. By 1944, he no longer believed the military.
Justice Roberts says that we have to be very skeptical about the claims of the government in these circumstances, and we have to hold the government to a very high standard of justification. And one has to wonder whether Roberts didn't want to make the same mistake the second time.
The third dissent was written by Justice Robert Jackson.
Justice Jackson actually referred to the precedent that the majority was creating as a loaded weapon.
And he said, if we uphold that,
well,
that precedent will stand like a loaded gun, ready to be picked up by someone in the future who will use it to justify who knows what.
He thought it meant that the courts and the rule of law were being eroded during wartime.
The decision came near the end of the war. Germany surrendered about 6 months later, and the United States had turned back the Japanese in the Pacific, making a Japanese invasion of the West Coast unthinkable.
The tides of war had changed much more favorably to the United States by the time the Korematsu case came down.
A month after the Korematsu decision, the camps officially began to close. Going home was the next challenge.
they felt that they would be greeted with hostile neighbors and so forth. And word also came back that many of their farms had in fact been destroyed, torched by people.
For all the fear of sabotage that led to internment, by the end of World War II, not a single person of Japanese ancestry in the United States had even been accused of sabotage. Fred Korematsu waited 40 years before he got the chance to clear his name. He joined up with a team of young lawyers led by Dale Manami.
Courts must be allowed to function even during times of crisis. It should not be subjugated to the will of an arbitrary military decision maker.
We wanted a declaration from the courts that what Japanese Americans did was not wrong, it was not espionage, it was not sabotage, they were not traitors.
Normally, once the Supreme Court decides a case, that's it. The case is closed. But Manami and his team brought the Korematsu case back to federal court under a motion that is rarely used and almost never successful: quorum nobis.
Quorum nobis is a way that someone can go into court after they've been convicted and serve their sentence and challenge it to say, this was wrong. The facts were wrong, and this court has a duty to correct it.
A legal historian named Peter Ayers had discovered documents proving that government lawyers had hidden evidence from the Supreme Court. On November 10, 1983, the U.S. District Court agreed. Fred Korematsu's conviction was vacated. It was thrown out.
I had to do some real deep thinking in order to reopen this case again, and I am very happy that I did, because this is not only for just the Japanese American citizens, but it's for all American citizens.
In 1988, Congress passed the Civil Liberties Act, which not only apologized for the internment, but paid each survivor of the camps $20,000. The act was signed by President Ronald Reagan and sponsored by Congressman Norman Mineta. That's him, right?
That's him right there.
This video was made possible by NordVPN.
NordVPN. What's a VPN? Gets around blockchain. Yeah. Hope you enjoyed that, online kids. All right, guys, we only have a little bit more notes left, and then we can do that quiz that Q's so excited about. Yes.
Big time.
All right, let's discuss these questions on the board. How would you guys in general feel if you came back from work and told that you had to pack up and leave? You had no home anymore. There was an eviction notice by the actual government telling you to get out. Salty? Savon, how would you feel? Pretty mad. Owen, how would you feel? Mad also. Is it impressive to you that these Japanese Americans just took it to prove their loyalty to America? They didn't do anything. They didn't cause any riots besides a few of them that just tried to ditch the internment camp order. There was no riots up at these camps. No, nothing. They just sit there and took it. Is that impressive to you guys or stupid? Impressive. Why do you think impressive? Beautiful answer, Savon. Yeah, just get it out of the way. Was this really necessary for FDR to do, Reese?
I mean, not really. Kind of overkill.
A bit overkill.
What if there was Japanese spies?
But in that video, it's mentioned that no one was charged with any crimes against the United States. So it's what fear control. It was fear that controlled us. So when giving up liberties in war, what do you get off in exchange? Like, what do you lose? Preston. Yeah, when you get liberty, when you give up liberties in war, what do you get in exchange? Not what you give up, what do you get? So if you're giving up like your right to free speech, what are you doing? What are you increasing? Security, nice, yes. Just to give the example of 9/11 again, that happens. Our liberties go down because now the government can search our cell phones, which finds the recording over there, to look at our private messages. But we're getting more security to prevent another attack like that happening. I gotta click on the slide. So, the Japanese internment camps is the second greatest abridgment of civil liberties in American history. 100,000 first and second generation Japanese Americans were placed in these internment camps who have never seen mainland Japan. So this order came from Executive Order 9066. I would remember that, write that down, underline it, star it, highlight it, whatever you have to do to get that in your brain. They were forced to sell their property. You saw selling refrigerators for $5. That 26-room hotel for only $500. They were held for the duration of the war. They were only let go in 1944. After 1945, my bad. They were let go in 1945. And they were freed after pledging loyalty to the United States. This was rooted in all the anti-Japanese propaganda that happened. Once Pearl Harbor was attacked by the Japanese and all that propaganda started out, you had more and more fear from the American people, and FDR's idea took the right step to prevent any Japanese spies from infiltrating the country or getting any information out. You saw the Supreme Court case of Komatsu versus the United States. It was upheld. He tried to avoid the internment camp order. He was arrested. He thought, hey, this kind of violates some of my amendment rights, but the court found that in times of war, this is what we needed to do. And it wasn't a racist decision. It was just a war decision because we were fighting the Japanese Empire. Of course, with 100,000 of these people in internment camps, it limits the number who serve in the military in the 442nd specifically. Give you about 20 more seconds to write that down. Am I good to move forward, Philly? All right. So, last slide I want to touch upon FDR's death. We talked about it in the Pacific. He dies. Truman takes over, has that big decision on his lap of the bomb. So, there was a massive celebration on April 12, 1945. While America is still at war, President Roosevelt was considered a national hero among these people, getting them out of the Great Depression with his New Deal ideas and acts, as well as leading them furiously through World War II as a great leader. They had huge respect for this man, and that celebration goes through it. So, we're going to take that quiz now. I'm going to give you a couple more instructions, and then we can start. So, once you're done with that quiz, there's going to be a double bubble activity sheet, a graphic organizer. You guys remember double bubbles, right? So they're going to be up here. You're going to write World War I home front in one big bubble, and the World War II home front in the next. You're going to write 3 similarities in the middle, and then you're going to give me 6 total differences and your name. And then once that is over and you're done with that, an exit ticket that goes on that bell ringer that we've been working on, and just turn both of those guys right up here. Does everybody understand that? So, okay. So, World War I home front in the first big bubble. World War II home front in the second big bubble. 3 similarities. And then 6 total differences. And your name. If you want an example, rationing happened in both World War I and World War II. That's a similarity for you guys. So that's after you finish your quiz, you'll come and grab this, you'll finish that up, you'll turn it up in here, you'll grab your bell ringer, you'll finish that one question, turn it up in here, and you're done. And you guys have a good spring break after that. Does everybody understand? And it's in the quizzes. It's called World War II Quiz 2021. There's no access code. Just click it and go. I'm going to talk to the online kids. All right, online kids. You guys will draw me a double bubble map after your quiz is over. In one big bubble, you have World War I home front. In the second, you have the World War II home front. You're going to give me 3 similarities in the middle, and then 6 total differences and your name. An example of a similarity would be rationing. That would go in one of the center ones. You will email that to me, and then you guys can still see the board. Once you're done with that, answer that exit ticket on your bell ringer stuff that you've been doing, and email me that as well. And then you'll be done, and you can have a great spring break. Does everyone understand?
Yeah.
Well, you guys are good. Can I get some thumbs up?
Yeah.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Ashton. Thank you, Shane. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Wilson. Yeah, I don't have online. It's just a simple drawing. You can read the picture and the picture you can write on. So they
Mr. Owens.
Yeah. Here we go. Yeah, I'm coming. How can I help?
What's the quiz called?
It's called World War II 2021.
Okay.
This is taking a quiz now.
You can make jokes now? Was that good? Can we do this? Is the video over?
Fantastic. Yeah, I paused it.
Oh, yeah.
There's no reason to show anything more.
That's so good.
Unless I want to show a couple of you guys turning stuff in.
You're so proud.
Good job. Thank you. Oh, resume share. Where's the